A garden is a group project. It's a community project. What do I mean by that? Well, when I started my garden, at first I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to like do all of this. I'm gonna have to do, I'm gonna have to buy the beds, I'm gonna have to do this and so on and so forth. And then very quickly I realized that that was insane. And I needed more resources that weren't actually gonna cost money if I was willing to just ask for help, right? So I started asking my neighbors when they were raking up their leaves if I could take them, right? And I could use them to, insulate my beds and cover the beds and as a kind of mulch for the winter. And then I realized as I started growing things that people would stop by and know that I was out here at regular intervals in between my speeches and definitely in the morning and in the evening. And they would stop and talk and they'd ask me questions. What am I growing? What has been successful for me? What hasn't? I would give them the surplus. Last year I was able to give, I had 6 or 7 pepper plants and I was getting so many at the same time that that I had to give them away half a dozen at a time, literally on a bi-weekly basis, twice a week. I was having to give away like half a dozen peppers. And that was in addition to the ones that I was keeping and eating, which was fantastic, right? And so many other things, right? People were asking, oh, how did you build them? So on and so forth, right? It allowed people to stop by and have a reason to talk to me, who otherwise were probably looking for a reason for, to talk to me for other than like, hi, and so, now my neighbors tell me, oh, well, I'm getting ready to like cut the lawn. Do you want me to save the grass clippings for you? They know I can't use them if they use pesticides or herbicides on their lawn. Oh, they're cutting down a tree. Oh, so-and-so cut down a tree. I'll get a text. So-and-so cut down a tree. And I think there's some nice pieces that you could use, when you build your next bed. My one neighbors, I hate celery. And so my one neighbors I grew it last year as a distractor plant and as a plant to help the pollinators. And 2 of my neighbors benefited from that. They got the 3 or 4 stalks of celery and they were like, it's the best celery we've ever had. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll grow it again. Not just, for them, but for the pollinators and so on and so forth. But having these conversations with neighbors, oh, are you growing this again? Or, blah, blah, blah. It has turned into a community project. People are looking to connect with one another in deep and meaningful ways. And sometimes you just need an in, right? Sometimes you just need an in. And sometimes that in is, hey, how are your strawberries doing? Hey, have you had a struggle with this particular thing? Oh, are you growing flowers? Which ones? Sometimes you just need an in. And when we create those opportunities for ourselves and use what resources we have, your yard is probably virtually unused like most people's, right? I've noticed that now that I have the garden, we spend way more time out in the garden. My nieces come over and run around on the stones. They love to find, oh, are there any ripe strawberries? My one niece is just under 2 years old. And she is obsessed with the strawberries. Now she'll come over, I'll show them to you in a second, but she'll come over and just start spreading the leaves because the leaves are as big as her face. She'll start spreading the leaves and looking for strawberries and eat them by the fistful. I mean, she just eats the whole thing, just doesn't matter how big the strawberry is. She's, just under 2. She's a tiny little thing. Well, close the whole thing, grab the green part and just drop it on the ground. She does that even if she's inside because she hasn't figured out that outside you can drop the green part, but not inside. She'll get it eventually. But the reality is that if we look for opportunities to better connect with ourselves and the world around us, we will find better opportunities to connect with one another along the way. And in a moment like now, it was always important. But now it's even more important because we have forgotten how important that is. Those minor connections with one another, those micro connections that, hi, how are you doing? Hey, so-and-so, just somebody saying your name, right? As you walk by and waving and checking in on you. We've forgotten how important those moments are to our mental health, and research backs that up, right? That those micro interactions are desperately important. And if we're spending all of our time looking at our phones inside of our homes, we're not getting those interactions. And then we're lonelier and lonelier and creating this self-fulfilling prophecy of, oh, I feel lonely. Okay, I'm going to spend more time on my phone, which isn't going to fulfill my needs at all. And I'm going to double down, right? It's really important that we recognize how important those moments are of connection and create those opportunities. And again, use the resources we have. Your yard is a resource. You do not need to use it as grass that does nothing for you. So these are the strawberries, by the way. Planted 12 slips last year, 6 survived. They've jumped ship, so they're now growing on the ground. And then I took 1 slip last year towards the end of the summer and planted it here in this bed because, fun fact, every 3 years you should rip up, if you have a bed of strawberries. If you're just letting them free roam, no big deal. But if you have a bed like mine, you should rip it out every 3 years, because that 4th year it will be diminishing returns. The strawberries will just have pulled all that they can out of the soil. And so what you want to do is stagger, right? So this year, the strawberry slip that I moved over, right, the bed that has just 1 little strawberry plant, that will spread over this summer. It's already spread out 2 arms, and strawberries send out a lot of arms. Could be argued that they're kind of invasive. They're not really, but they're kind of aggressive. Loki, that's my dog. So anyway, this year they'll spread out in the 2nd bed. And at the end of this summer, I'll grab a slip and I'll put it in a 3rd bed. Because the 2nd year you spread one out, the 1st bed that you saw have so many strawberries, that I started with 6 or 12 slips and 6 survived, right? This secondary bed, I only started with 1 slip, and it's going to have, spread out significantly, probably covering about 1/3 to 1/2 of this bed this year, and not produce very much fruit. I won't want it to, because I'll want it to, in fact, just establish roots. So I'll clip off most of the flowers. So next year, it'll actually produce fruit. So the big bed, the main 1st bed, and the secondary bed will produce fruit next year, at which time I'll transfer a slip to the 3rd bed so it can get started, right? And we do that because that way, by year 3, when I have to rip out the 1st bed, the 2nd bed will be pretty well established and growing a significant amount of fruit, and the 3rd bed will have just be getting started, so that there will be, a similar amount of fruit available every single year. And then I'll be able to leave the bed where the strawberries are currently, the main 1st bed. I'll be able to, do herbs and things like that. Maybe I'll grow a mix of oats and rye and clover in there to put a bunch of nutrients back in the soil, and then you turn it over in the spring and it basically mulches itself. But rotating crops, even when you companion plant, right? When you have a pretty significant crop like a strawberry, is really important, right? That diversity in the soil, that feeding the soil, is really important. And if we think about our lives the same way, right? These interactions that we have with different people in our lives, they become really important, right? And we have these well-established, long-standing relationships, but even they need infusion of something, right? For them to continue forward in healthy ways, right? Otherwise, right, they become a little bit toxic and insular, and we can create groupthink in a way that's really unhealthy, right? If we think about one particular plant taking over a bed, it's like groupthink. It's only recirculating the same things, and eventually you run out of great, important, beautiful, wonderful ideas, right? And it's important for us to remember that there has to be an infusion of life through diverse life, right? That's where we get life, is diversity. And when diversity is lost, so is life.